Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel, where today I'm going to be ranking all of the 16 pan eyeshadow palettes within my collection. I recently did a video where I ranked the 9 pans and then 12 to 15, and I'll probably do a separate video as well ranking everything higher than 17. But if you're interested in seeing that, don't go anywhere. If you've never been here before, hello, my name is Rachel and I'm a homeschooling stay-at-home mom. I really like to play with eyeshadow, especially colorful eyeshadow. I've been feeling a bit more neutral lately, which is where this look came in, and this eyeshadow look is linked also in the description box below, along with all of the palettes that I'm talking about today, if they're still available. Now, without further ado, let's get going. I have to apologize in advance if I sound out of breath. At the time of this filming, I am quite pregnant. I've got about 4 or 5 weeks to go before baby comes, and I am out of breath. I've been doing some pre-filming, so by the time you guys see this video, I may have already had the baby. I'm not sure when it's going live, but I'm pre-filming because I'm going to be having a baby, and I'm trying to get some content lined up in the queue so that there's not this huge gap. Anyway, that explains why I am sounding winded, because I'm a little winded. And I do want to put in a caveat. At this point, I don't have any palettes in my collection that are bad quality. I'm very careful to curate my collection between Color Story and Formula. I may even buy a palette in a Color Story, which I already own, if it's a formula that I know I prefer, and then I would just get rid of the old palette. So I always have kind of a rotating stock of, I don't use this anymore, I don't like it anymore, I have something that's better. And so my collection is not huge. In fact, I can card above a recent video where I did a whole collection tour. You can see everything that I owned at the time of that filming. Each of the palettes that I mentioned today are not bad quality at all. I would recommend all of them if you like them and you can find them. Certainly, they're all good palettes. This ranking is totally subjective to how I'm feeling right now, what I have found myself using more often, what colors I'm into right now. It's completely subjective, but it's still so much fun to look at your collection and see what's getting the most love, what gets you excited, things like that. So let's start at the bottom of the list with palette number 9, and that's going to be the Mimosa palette from BH Cosmetics. I do like this palette. Again, I like all of these palettes. They're all good. If I didn't like them, I wouldn't still have them. But this palette is lowest in the list simply because it's kind of monochromatic. Not totally. There are obviously other colors in here, but it's really heavy on pink, as you would expect, right? However, I have found during my eyeshadow journey that pink is like my least used eyeshadow color. I very rarely do a pink look. I may grab pinks to bring into a different look, but I almost never just go all pink. So this palette doesn't get tons of use, but it's really good quality. It's beautiful formula. I do like the assortment of colors. I wish it went darker. Wish it had a couple of deep reds in here, maybe even 1 or 2 more purpley tones. I understand they want to stay with the theme of Mimosa, but they also have to make it attractive to the consumer, and I, being a consumer, want a bit more variety. However, I do really like the yellow, the white, the orange, and the shimmers are really pretty. These two could have been a bit different. These two could have been a bit different, but overall, it's just pretty. It's a pretty, soft, afternoon brunch kind of color story. Next, I'm going to talk about the Through My Eyes palette between ColourPop and I Love Sarai. This palette is a couple years old at this point. I don't know what year it was released, but I got it secondhand way after it was discontinued. But I do like the color story. I think it's kind of cool. I like that we have light and dark. I like the more bronzy kinds of tones. There's nothing in here that's too neutral. This one up here is kind of a skin tone for me, so I might use it to blend something else. But we don't have browns or beiges. All of the more neutral tones in here are kind of off neutral, you know, more pink leaning, a little bit more purple leaning, more bronze leaning, and I think that's quite interesting. This one's ranking higher than Mimosa because it does have a more varied color story, and because there's a little bit of diversity within the shimmers. The Mimosa shimmers were pretty, but you had like 3 options for what you might want to do with them. There were more than that in here, and I think the quality is good. I do like it. It's very nice. For the same reason that Through My Eyes ranked higher than Mimosa, the BH Cosmetics Summer in Saint-Tropez palette ranked higher than Through My Eyes, because this color story is, again, yet a little more varied. This one now has the purpley tones with some pinks. We've got some reds, some yellow and orange, 1 or 2 more neutrals, and the shimmers are more varied. Each of these shimmers are different enough that they're not, you know, they're just not too close to anything else in the palette. Like the Mimosa had 2 pinks that were really similar. This doesn't have that. These shimmers are all different enough to warrant being here. And because this can offer me a little more variety in color story and final result, it has to be ranked a little bit higher. I don't love this blue shade. It's not that it doesn't perform well, just on my skin tones, it's kind of a, I have to be careful where I place it because it could make me look a bit tired, but overall, it's a nice palette. A subscriber gifted this to me and I'm so grateful because if I just looked at it, I might not have kept it. But once I dipped into it, I realized that it's very good quality and it's interesting. And I have liked each of the looks I've come up with using this palette. Passion in Paris, also from BH Cosmetics, is next in the lineup. This palette is very good. This one gives me some of the deep, moody tones, but it also has a good arrangement of lighter tones. So it's not all dark, you know? I have some lighter tones over here, a pretty purpley matte over here, some lighter shimmers, and then the interesting pops of red, which you might not expect. And every shade in this palette looks good with every other shade in the palette. They all have a similar base tone. Some palettes do this well, some palettes don't do it well. Sometimes you have just a random smattering of colors and there's something about it that doesn't work. It's usually undertone. In this palette, all of the undertones match. So no matter what you do, it's gonna work nicely. There are a couple shadows in here that I don't tend towards, mainly these darker blue shimmers. I like a lighter tone shimmer and you'll see that come in later. But overall, this is a really good palette. There are a couple shades in here, such as the white shimmer that I reached for just as an inner corner highlight when I want a really bright, sparkly inner corner. This palette offers me that. On the heels of that, we're going up one notch with the Blueberry Muffin palette, also BH Cosmetics. This was when BH Cosmetics was launching nothing but gold. They had perfected their formula and they were killing it. Well, okay. Maybe they weren't killing it because they ended up filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. But as far as their formula goes, they were killing it. Travel series, the brunch series, the sweet shop series, also good. So here is obviously from the brunch series, the Blueberry Muffin palette. I think this palette's super cool. And that's the thing, it's very cool toned. Even the browns are cool toned. A couple neutrals, a couple of blues. BH Cosmetics did a great job with their blue mattes. No matter what the shade was, it was great. It was just really nice, especially the lighters. This one is ranking a little bit higher than Passion in Paris because it has lighter tone shimmers. My personal preferences are mid to light tone shimmers on my own look almost all the time. There are some exceptions, but this palette gives me the lighter tone shimmers that work with the darker outer corner mattes that I like to use. That's just my aesthetic. I wish it had a bit more variety. A couple of these shimmers are a little too close to others, but overall it is really pretty. You get some really nice cool toned looks from this. I wish that they brought in more purple tone here or there. I think that absolutely would have stayed on theme with blueberries because blueberries are not actually blue. They're kind of a purpley, right? So I think this palette could have benefited from having fewer of the similar tone shimmers and more purple tones in matte and shimmers. But overall, lovely palette, fabulous formula. You just get really cool looks from it and it's fun. Now let's shift gears to a different brand. We're going to talk about Beauty Bay, and here is the Midnight Palette 16 pan. This palette was launched in a 9 pan, a 16 pan, and a 42 pan. This is the 16 pan. I've almost bought the Earthy a couple of times, but because I have a green palette, which I love, the Glam Light Dirty Martini palette, I can't really justify having Earthy, but I do really like the Earthy. Anyway, rabbit trail. Here is the Midnight Palette. Midnight Palette is blue and purple. I love blue and purple together. I love blue and purple eyeshadow. I think it's so cool and fun. And this is a very nice assortment of blues and purples. Nothing is too dark for me, even though there's a black. Yeah, black. I'll use black to deepen an outer corner or to smoke out a lower lash line. So I do use black. I like it when there's a black in my palettes. But aside from the black, nothing is too dark for me that I'm not going to reach into it. I will use every single shade in this palette between mattes and shimmers. I do like that there are some much lighter tone mattes. You could even use these two as inner corner highlights depending on your skin tone, but it probably would work on almost any skin tone. They're light enough. Maybe they could be a smidge lighter, but they still work. And there's a good assortment of formula. You can do a whole matte look, or you can do something that's really dynamic and pretty with different formulas and sparkle. And it's just, there's a lot of diversity considering it's only 2 colors. And I think it is beautiful. I really like this palette. And I'm just realizing this now, but my top 3 are Uden's Eye. I love Udon's Eye. They're probably my favorite brand. I love their colors, their formulas, their color stories, their packaging. Udon's Eye hits it out of the park every time they launch something, and especially their last, I don't know, year or two of palettes have just been so good. So in spot number 3, we have the Norns palette. Now, this is actually kind of funny. I was planning on getting rid of this palette. I had it listed on the secondhand apps, Poshmark and Mercari, and I have a series on my channel called The Week Of, where I do an entire week of videos using only one palette. So I decided to do a week of Norns before I passed it on. And during that week, I fell back in love with it because it is really good. It's really good. I can card that series above for you, and you can find The Week of Norns if you're interested. The reason that I had planned on selling it is because when I first got it, 2 things. First off, my skill level was not great. So no matter what I did, it was pretty stark and dramatic and not necessarily in a good way. And secondly, I was quite excited about this middle column, particularly the red. But when I used the red, I found that I didn't really like the formula. Now, Udon's Eye has improved their formula since this palette, and I have never found a shade in any of their since this palette launches that had this kind of formula that I found so difficult to work with. Also this brown up here. They must have upgraded something and improved, but those 2 shades were what kind of excited me about the palette. And when I used them with not a great result because of the formula as opposed to because of my skills, I was pretty discouraged and I kind of tucked it away. But then when I did my week of series, I used all the other shadows, all of them. I touched every single shadow and I found that they are really amazing and beautiful. This one right here called Optimism stood out as very unique, and I had so much fun playing with this palette, and I got very different looks, a lot of variety. This palette has to rank higher because it is really beautiful and it gives a lot of different options as far as mattes and shimmers and multichromes. The whole bottom row is duo or multichromes. So sparkly, so beautiful, so impactful. I don't know, it's really good. It's good. In place number 2, we have the Hela palette between Udon's Eye and Angelica Nyqvist. I really like this palette. Green is my favorite eyeshadow color to play with. Green in general makes me smile. It makes me happy. I just love green. I don't know if it's the most flattering eyeshadow color on me, but I don't really care because when I do my makeup, most of the time I'm just being creative, expressing myself, playing with color. My face is my canvas. Sometimes I want to be a little bit more classy or flattering, but most of the time it's wild colors and I'm having tons of fun. And that's me, and that's okay. Green might not be the most flattering shade on me, but I love to play with it. It makes me feel happy and calm and relaxed. So this palette is very heavy on the greens. It's not monochromatic, but it's pretty green heavy. You know, probably 40% is green tones. There are obviously other colors in here. Pink is a beautiful pairing for green. And we have 2 different mattes. And then there's a purple that you can use to deepen it out, which is lovely. We have a couple really interesting shades on the bottom here, kind of a sparkly charcoal. This one over here can be used as a face highlighter as well. It's a multi-chrome. This one here is really an interesting shade. It's a little bit silver, a little bit purple, a little bit brown. And then we have these lighter tones up here as well. Again, fabulous inner corner highlight. The only reason that this palette is number 2 instead of number 1 is because there are like 3 shades in here that don't look very good on me. This one and this one in particular, and then this one. Now, I will use these shades. I'll pair them with other shadows within the palette or blend out a different tone. I use them with other shadows, but they're not my go-to shades. I'll probably never hit pan in any of those 3 shades. Angelica has more yellow golden undertones, and so those shades look amazing on her, not so great on me. That's really the only reason that this palette is ever lower than anything else, is just those 2 shades. Otherwise, it would probably be tied at number 1. And finally, if you have been on my channel for the last 3 or 4 months, you'll know number 1 is, of course, the Merry Christmas palette from Udon's Eye. This palette's amazing. It's amazing. Let's look at the color story. Can we just look at the color story? It's so cool. It's so different. Have you ever seen a color story quite like this? It seems random, like a smattering of colors, but if you look a little bit more closely, there is reason. We've got some greens in different tones and warmth levels, cool toned, warm toned. We have some more neutral tones over here, and then some pops of color that work with the neutrals. They work with the greens. There are shimmers that work with everything. We've got deepening shades, we've got light shades, we've got a multi-chrome up here. And it's an amazing formula. It's amazing formula. I also did a week of Merry Christmas palettes. So again, check out that week of playlist and you'll find all of the week of palette videos that I've done. Merry Christmas, there are at least 4 looks using the Merry Christmas palette. I also have an Uden's Eye playlist and there are more looks in that playlist. Anyway, this is an amazing palette. It's such good quality. It's such beautiful everything. It absolutely deserves to be number 1. So that is my ranking of my 16 pan eyeshadow palettes. This video was actually a little bit easier to film than I thought it would be. My favorite eyeshadow palette size is about 9 to 20. Anything smaller than that, I don't tend to remember, and I find that those palettes offer me less as far as if I'm going to use 6 shades in an eye look. There you go, that's what I've got. And anything larger than that, I tend to start feeling overwhelmed. So I really like the 16 pan size. It's just a good fit for my personality and my preferences. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for being with me. Remember to check the description box for all of the information you might want. The products about what I'm wearing on my face are in the video where I do this eyeshadow tutorial. So click that link if you want to know what I'm wearing. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day until I see you again. Thanks for being here. Bye.